Coming up, the Heat complete the upset. They shock the number 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks. This is Locked On Game to Game, NBA.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. Local experts join us to go over the playoff matchups from last night in the National Basketball Association. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Playoff Jimmy did it again last night. He put up 42 points, and the Miami Heat became just the 6th 8 seed to ever upset a 1 seed in the first round. Locked On Bucks goes over the historic loss for Milwaukee.
Game 5 followed an eerily similar path to Game 4 after another epic collapse by the Milwaukee Bucks, and this time it has ended their season on their home floor. My name's Kane Pittman. I'm the host of the Locked On Bucks podcast. Yes, you have to tip your hat to Jimmy Butler, who had another 42 points and just an overall outrageous series. But this fourth quarter and overtime from the Bucks was an absolute disaster in every single facet. They were not able to operate in the half court. Their shot selection was a disaster. They were 5 for 25 from the field, which is hard to believe entering the fourth quarter with a 16-point lead. Mike Budenholzer just had some mind-blowing decisions on the sideline as head coach. And ultimately, it all added up to a lack of composure from this Bucks team, and their season is done. As I said, one of the great upsets in NBA history. It has to be said, for a first seed to be gone. Gee, there is plenty to talk about with the Bucks, not only from tonight, but it's going to carry on right through the offseason. It is a very, very interesting and scary time if you're a Milwaukee Bucks fan. We're going to break it all down on the Locked On Bucks podcast, wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. This was an absolute shocker.
The Knicks will meet the Heat in the second round after they upset the number 4 seed, the Cavaliers, with a 5-game series win. Now, New York capped it off with a road win last night, and our Locked On Knicks host recaps the series.
Knicks in 5. The New York Knicks have advanced to the second round. Alex Wolf here from Locked On Knicks. And how do you win a playoff game when you're on the road in a tough situation, trying to advance to the second round for the first time in 10 years? Well, it helps if you have a Mitchell Robinson who can give you 13 points, 18 rebounds, 11 of those offensive. And for those of you keeping track of at home, Mitchell Robinson, 18 boards, Jared Allen and Evan Mobley combined just 13. So that will definitely help. Julius Randle was getting back on track until, unfortunately, getting his ankle re-sprained in the first half. He would sit the rest of the game, but Obi Toppin steps in as 12 points in the third quarter in his stead and really buoyed the Knicks in that quarter and helped them stay ahead. So lots of good, one bad thing, but no matter what, the Knicks are on to the second round. We'll have more on Locked On Knicks.
Coming up, the Grizzlies force a Game 6 against the Lakers. This is Locked On Game to Game NBA. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. If you've ever thought that you could run your own basketball franchise, this is the game for you because you can prove it. The game allows you to manage practically every strategic aspect of the job. You get to pick the coaches, the assistants, trade and train the players. You also control free agency and the draft as well. It's challenging and realistic. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. Locked On NBA listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store, so make sure that you check it out. To download the game, just go to probasketballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up in the App Store. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. Welcome back. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NBA. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. With their backs against the wall, the Memphis Grizzlies took care of business at home. They have forced a Game 6 against the LA Lakers after a 30-point nights from both Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. Locked On Grizzlies and Lakers recap Game 5.
In FedEx Forum, what is said to the god of death on this night? Not today. It is not the time for the season to end for the Memphis Grizzlies. They pull out a big Game 5 win, and now the series turns back to Los Angeles for Game 6 on Friday. I'm Joe Mullinax of Locked On Grizzlies, and if I seem excited, it's because I am. Because for the first time in these playoffs, we saw Ja Morant and Desmond Bane appear the way that they did throughout the regular season, like one of the best backcourts in the NBA. Both players dominated throughout the contest, getting to their spots, getting good looks, finding ways to create offense, not just for themselves, but for others. And it helped the Memphis Grizzlies get enough scoring. Luke Kennard certainly helped as well. His spacing was massive in this game, helping the Grizzlies go on a big run. He hurts his shoulder. Hopefully, Luke Kennard will be good to go going into Game 6. He matters a heck of a lot.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of the Locked on Lakers podcast, and the Lakers lose 116-99 in Memphis to the Grizzlies, forcing a Game 6. And despite a few pushes, including one in the fourth, the Lakers were never able to establish any real control of this game. The Grizzlies' backcourt of Ja Morant and Desmond Bane were absolutely brilliant. They combined for 64 points, a barrage of inside-out scoring. And while Anthony Davis had a monster game, 31 points, 19 rebounds, 2 blocks, LeBron James followed up arguably his most heroic game as a Laker with a real clunker. 15 points on 5 of 17 shooting, 5 turnovers against 5 assists. He looked gassed basically from minute one, and throughout a lot of this game, so did the Lakers. D'Angelo Russell and Austin Reeves, some nice playmaking, but they combined for 28 points on 24 shots. Clearly not going to get it done. A lot more to get into, so make sure you are subscribed to the Locked on Lakers YouTube channel and that you make Locked on Lakers your first listen wherever you get your podcasts.
When an NBA playoff series is tied at 2 games apiece, the winner of Game 5 wins the series more than 80% of the time. With those stakes on the line on Wednesday, Warriors and Kings was going to be a battle. Our Locked On hosts tell you how it played out in Sacramento.
And just like that, the Golden State Warriors, who were down 0-2 in their first round series against the Sacramento Kings, have now taken a commanding 3-2 series lead. I'm Cyrus Sauces with your Locked On Warriors, Locked On Now recap of the defending world champions hanging on to win a pivotal road game against the Sacramento Kings, 123-116. That makes 28 consecutive playoff series where the Warriors have won at least one road game. They also remain undefeated in Game 5s where a series is tied 2-2 during the dynasty. And the Warriors can now close this out in Game 6 Friday, a weird 5 p.m. tip because the Lakers and Grizzlies are also playing, but 5 o'clock's the tip at Chase Center. And Stephen Curry led the way tonight again, 31 points. Andrew Wiggins with a solid 20 points. Klay Thompson adding 25. Follow the program on Twitter at Locked On Dubs.
That's it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NBA. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. It's the playoffs now. Make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On NBA and your favorite team's Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kanani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.